This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so here is a sample student literature review narrative that we'll take a look at. This is a little bit more extensive than the assignment that we're being asked to do. However, it gives a good example of both the kind of feedback that the Online Campus Writing Center would provide to literature review, and also the kinds of revisions that we can do in our own work. So to start with, I'm going to explain a little bit about how our feedback system works, and I'm going to provide an example as I go throughout this paper. So to begin with, all of our feedback is provided through tracked changes in the Review tab of Microsoft Word. So I'm going to put the original on for now, and I will show you the overall feedback when we're finished. Essentially, what we do is we vary our track changes with commentary. This means that we will change some things, for example, inserting commas or moving commas directly within the lines of the document. And the writer can use the Accept button in the Review tab to accept those changes. And that we will also use commentary to explain where corrections can be made. Our goal is to create self-sufficient writers. So we won't make every change necessary within the document, but we will note where changes could be made and provide suggestions and modeled corrections. This helps the writer to apply those rules and to learn them by applying them and practicing them themselves, which leads to the development of writing skills and eventually the lack of need to use the Online Campus Writing Center, because we'll have confident, self-sufficient writers. So for example, I might use a 3-step process. In identifying an error pattern, I might model how to fix the error directly in line and explain in a comment what I've done. Then if I find the error again, I might just provide a comment explaining the need to make the same correction that I made before. And then finally, I might just continue to highlight where that error is present. Typically, I try not to highlight too many error patterns because it can be overwhelming, and we want to possibly do multiple levels of revision if we need to work on many themes within our writing. So I limit my feedback to 4 themes. Usually I will identify something like a grammar theme, an APA theme, a higher order theme like synthesis, and the 4th can be kind of like a grab bag. I might do another grammar if grammar seems to be a big focus, or I might do a second APA if citations and plagiarism are concerned, or maybe I'll focus on synthesis and transitions and higher order skills. But usually I won't use more than 4 highlighting colors throughout the literature review feedback that I provide, because I don't want to have it be overwhelming and difficult to see what correction is needed. This isn't to say that I only provide feedback on those 4 things. I'll provide feedback on anything that I see throughout my review, but I'll use specific highlight colors to demonstrate to the reader where their 4 largest themes of revision are present, so they can kind of visualize where they need to be focusing the most attention. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate this here in a live review. I'm going to go through this document and explain where I'm finding the synthesis revision needs present and how I would provide those 4 themes of revision to this writer.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so beginning off, what I will do is I will skim the document to check for any overall APA formatting errors. So as I'm looking through, I can see that most of the headers are level 2 headers aligned to the left margin. This isn't necessarily a problem, except that I don't have a level 1 header or a title on the first page. APA requires both of those things. So what I will do is I'll make sure that my track changes are on, and I'll make some suggestions to the writer. So I'll say that title goes here, and I'll make sure there's double spacing since APA requires double spacing, and I'll suggest that background might be a level 1 header. So here I'll make a comment and say APA requires level 1 headings prior to using level 2, for example. And I'll close that. As I go through, typically I will focus on smaller level grammar things like commas and spacing, but for the purpose of this live review, I'm going to focus on some overall themes. So here, I'm going to note that the introductory element comma is missing from this sentence. So I will model it to begin with, and then I'll make a comment where I will insert some of the Online Campus Writing Center's visual graphics. So often we will embed feedback.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so beginning the review. The first thing that I'll do is sort of skim the document and see if there's any overall APA formatting errors that need to be taken care of. So I see that the header is taken care of. I have the title here. I don't need to add anything in terms of that, except that the page number is missing, and most of the APA headers that I'm seeing are level 2, the left aligned headers here. This isn't necessarily a problem. It's okay to have lots of level 2 headers, except that APA requires a level 1 header before them and a title, neither of which I'm seeing here. So making sure that my track changes are on, I'm going to make some suggestions to the writer. I'm going to say that the title goes here for APA. I'm going to ensure that double spacing is maintained since that's required. I'm going to suggest that background be a level 1 header. And I'm going to keep skimming. Usually I would go line by line for at least 10 pages or 1 hour's worth of review. But for the purpose of our review, I'm going to focus on some specific themes that are relevant for synthesis. So the first thing I noticed that's relevant is the introductory element comma structure is not present. Here, currently requires a comma. This is because currently it's an introductory element that has been moved out of its normal sentence position to be the start of the sentence to create sort of a transition effect. So the lack of career development opportunities for front desk staff is currently causing turnover within the organization, is where currently would typically be. Here the author has moved it to the front, however, to topicalize it and to create sort of a transition between the ideas. These transitions, as we looked at on the synthesis page, are very important for integrating ideas into a uniform theme. So this is something we really want to pay attention to when we are writing our synthesis, is this introductory element comma. So something that we like to do with Online Campus Writing Center feedback is embed graphic representations for our writers of our feedback. So here I'm going to resize an image that explains the introductory element comma for my writer. I'm also going to provide some feedback on what the introductory element comma's purpose is. And something to note here, it seems like this is very small, but if you simply just zoom in using the zoom in bar here at the bottom, the feedback becomes perfectly clear. So if ever you receive feedback from the Online Campus Writing Center and you're like, oh, I can't see that graphic, it's too small, you can just zoom in and you'll be able to see the entire graphic and then zoom back out. So I've noted to myself, okay, the student might have a little bit of issues with the introductory element comma. This might be one of the 4 themes that I'm going to focus on. So what I'll do right away is pay attention to that and sort of skim the rest of the paper just to see if there's more of the same error. So I note here, oh, there's a second one. Typically, about the second or third instance of an error, I'll start to decide if it's important enough to make it one of the 4 themes that I'm going to focus on. Because this is an issue that will possibly impact the clarity of the synthesis, I'm going to assign it a highlight color. In this case, I'm going to use yellow. And I'm going to insert the comma and model it one more time and make a comment to the student to let them know. I have inserted introductory element, comma here. See prior comment. Future need for this comma is highlighted in yellow. So I'm going to create sort of like a map key for my student. I'm going to highlight this so that they can refer back to it to find out what the yellow highlighting meant. But I'm not going to continue to make commentary. I'm simply going to highlight where this comma is needed. So I'm going to go through real quickly and see if I can't find more areas where it's needed. So here in another study has been moved to the front of the sentence. That it's going to be needed there as well. Let's see, moving forward, if I can find any more. If I can't, I will simply come back later and pay more attention closely. At the moment, I'm not seeing any more, so I'm going to go back to where I was and review line by line once again. So as I'm going, I'm not seeing another theme quite yet, but I'm noticing a few errors here and there. For example, there's an agreement error here. Variables such as career development and their effects. Here, this comma isn't necessary because this and joins 2 verbs, includes and does not. So I keep moving on to the next page. Here I notice purpose statement. This is typically a level 1 header. So I'll resolve that for my writer. Double checking that problem statement as well. Should be a level 1 header. Here I notice there is a comma splice, which is a comma inserted between 2 complete sentences. So career development opportunities will be explored. A plan to implement them will be developed. Here, this is an error that I'm going to resolve by inserting a coordinating conjunction and I'm going to make a comment to explain this error. So we have several kinds of feedback that we provide, some of which are explanations for why an error creates disruption in meaning. So here I'm going to paste an explanation to the writer of how this error could change the meaning of the sentence and lead to reader confusion. Then I'm going to continue on and see what I can find. Comparing to here, there's an extra word. We don't need will. Then employees will be compared. Here, there's a punctuation problem. I need capital to start a sentence. And now I've hit one of the higher order issues I might want to focus on. So here in career development programs, I have 2 rather short paragraphs. It's important for proper paragraphing that we contain inside of our paragraphs all of the relevant information necessary. So here, both of these paragraphs pertain to the same topic, but they're separated. So I might want to note to the writer that for cohesion and flow, I want to contain all this information in the same paragraph. I'll just make a note. And then I will keep going. I noticed it helps the company prepare here. Small word choice issue. Continuing on, I start to notice a synthesis problem. So my student seems to be only using one source per paragraph. As we reviewed, this does not comprise synthesis. So I'll need to make some notes to my student explaining that some of these paragraphs will need to be joined together, especially the shorter ones that don't discuss the topic completely on their own, in order to create synthesis. So here, these 3 paragraphs, I'm going to highlight in a color. I'm going to use green. I'll make a note at the beginning that I have used green text to indicate that synthesis revisions are needed here. And I'll explain why. Synthesis requires multiple sources to discuss the overall idea or theme being presented here. This creates contextualization, there, of the ideas within research, increasing their validity and connection to your argument. To resolve this issue, consider combining these smaller paragraphs into one so that your paragraphs contain multiple sources meeting the requirements for synthesis. So now that I've selected green font, I'm going to remember that and I'm going to use it throughout. So I'm going to keep looking and see where else only one source is used. So I see here that I have 2 small paragraphs again, which each only have one source. So I'll make another note. You may wish to combine these paragraphs as they both discuss the same topic, evidenced by the usage of another study confirmed, and this is necessary for synthesis. And I will highlight this in green text. So as I go through, I'm noting the same thing here. which I'll highlight for my writer. And I noticed a couple of grammar errors that I wanted to pay attention to. So here, I noticed that my writer has a list, helps employees to develop their skills, increase their knowledge, and increase their visibility. The serial comma is missing here. APA is a big proponent of the serial comma. This is the rule that there needs to be one less comma than the amount of things in a list. So if I have 3 things, I have 2 commas. The reason that this matters is contained in this little blip that I have here. By removing the serial comma, I change the entire meaning of this sentence. So in the first, I love my parents, Wonder Woman and Superman, I'm implying that my parents are superheroes, when in fact I meant the second. I love my parents, comma, Wonder Woman, comma, and Superman. 3 distinct entities. So here we can see how that serial comma is very important before the final and, because it completely changed the meaning of the expression. So I've noticed that that might be a problem. And I've noticed here that this comma is again unnecessary because this and is joining 2 verbs. This can help employees and help the company. So there doesn't need to be a comma here because of the fanboy comma, which has to be applied between 2 subject-verb units, doesn't apply. Help and help share the same subject. So there's only 1 subject for these 2 verbs. I might make a note to my writer and say that. And again, I might add a graphic to help explain this to the writer. So here, I just insert my little graphic to help visually depict the rule to the writer. Then continuing, I note a synthesis issue with an article explores the application. In our review of the synthesis resources, we noted 2 different ways of paraphrasing. The first was to discuss the actual findings and to use a parenthetical citation at the end. The second was to list the authors and then to discuss their finding. However, we don't typically refer to studies by using language such as an article explores. This is too vague. We either need to list the author's names and their credentials, or we need to just discuss the findings and insert a parenthetical citation. So here I'll make a suggestion to this writer that they take the author's name and pull it in line, which means inside of the sentence. So here I'll make adjustments to grammatically fit this in. And I'll make a note for my writer so that they understand why I've done this. So rather than saying an article, refer to the authors specifically per APA recommendations. Okay, so moving on, I note that we have some present tense. It examines. However, APA requires past tense when discussing all literature that has been completed. So here, I'm going to make that note. And I'm going to immediately start skimming to see if this is an overall issue. Here I notice and contributes. So I note that yes, this is going to be a continued issue. So I'm going to choose a highlight color. In this case, I'm going to pick purple. I'm going to highlight the D that I added here to indicate past tense, and I'm going to make a comment to the writer to explain why I've used highlighting. And as I said before, I'll highlight it like that. Now I'm going to keep skimming, and I'm going to highlight where I find the need for past tense. And here, I found an introductory element comma. Traditionally, has been moved in front of the subject. We highlighted it in yellow before, so we'll keep doing that here. Here I note, this paragraph is much too short to be by itself. Paragraphs have to grammatically be 3 sentences or more. This is in order to be sure that we've properly discussed a topic. Here I'm going to make a note to this writer of this rule. Okay, so I've made that note, and I'm going to keep going. Here I'm noticing the same issue, so I'm going to highlight my prior comment, and I'm going to explain that here as well. Here I see a citation needed. Group mentoring is another type of mentorship which pairs one senior employee to multiple proteges. This might require a citation, so I'm going to tell the writer that. And continuing on, I'm noticing again that there are singular sources used throughout. So I'm going to make a couple highlights and show where paragraphs could be combined. Then I'll highlight that same text and make a comment. And I'll close that. So you can see here that now I have so many comments that they've collapsed. What that means is that the arrows have to be clicked on in order for the full comment to pop up. So when you review your own writing, if you notice a lot of these gray arrows, that means that you should click on them to open the comment entirely. Another option is to go into the Review tab and to click the Review panel. So once you click the Review panel, you can scroll through and read each of the comments. You can click on them as well, and it will open the correct page where the comment is inserted. Sometimes I find this to be easier. It helps you quickly resolve comments and also see themes. So you could see lots of yellow, for example, or you could see lots of green and find what you're looking for. So I'll close that for a moment and continue with this review. So I notice here, the study takes. Here's another need for past tense. So I'll highlight that like I did before. Sometimes it doesn't pop up until some of the comments have been resolved. So I'll make a note to past tense is required here. And I'll make another note but this shouldn't be by itself here. This is too short. Okay. So moving forward, I see some headings with no topics underneath them. So I'm going to highlight them and I'm going to explain that APA requires there to be material under each heading. Please add a minimum of 3 sentences per section. And I'll keep going. Here I notice sort of like a hanging header. It doesn't have a period to end the header, and it doesn't seem to be completed. So I'm going to make a note rather than completing it myself, because this is important to retain the author's voice. And I'm going to say, check here for if this idea is completed. I am inserting a period to complete the APA level 3 header needed. But please do verify the information. So APA level 3 headers run in line with the paragraphs they apply to. This means that there needs to be a period, since the header is going to be essentially a part of the paragraph and needs to be separated in some way. So I've placed the period here and moved the header in line with that paragraph that it applies to. Here I'm noticing the same issue. This paragraph is too small, so I'll make the same note. I see an error here with this, and I need a possessive here. Findings suggest, findings suggested, past tense per APA. Here, a year is missing from the citation, which is very important. APA always requires a year in a parenthetical citation, so I'm going to make that note. Okay. Then I'm going to continue. And I note that there might be some commas missing. Here I need to apply the serial comma. Here I have an agreement issue. Emotions and feelings are plural. Here this comma isn't necessary again. Okay. And now I've come upon an APA labeling issue. So APA requires specific kinds of labels to avoid any kind of gender bias. So I need to note here that the alternation of women and men and male and female is an issue. Women and men faculty is not correct. APA would request female and male faculty. I also see here that there's a citation error. The et al. Convention is not capitalized. The period comes after the all, followed by the comma. I'm going to double check for any remaining potential gender issues. Female faculty. There's no need for capitalizing here, so I'm going to remove that. Here, full professor participants is a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to say participating full professors were significantly less likely. Females, males, females. Okay, so I've made several revisions at this point, so I'm going to make a note to the author to continue this. Here in this paragraph, I have revised the usage of women and men to label participants to female and male per APA's requirements for avoiding language that might introduce gender bias to your writing. This is an important thing for my writer to be aware of. Okay, so I'm reaching page 8 now, which I note now needs a page number. So I'm going to insert page numbers and continue. I notice that there's a closing parenthesis needed here. And otherwise, I will continue to note the same patterns that I did before throughout. So I'm seeing quite a few paragraphs that only have one citation. So I would read here and decide which ones are similar and suggest that the writer add them together. So here we're all talking about social theories. So I might highlight these and suggest that these be combined. Okay. Here, these refer to the same topic again, so I'm going to suggest we merge them, copy the same comment from before. Here, I see a study conducted. Again, we want to be referring to the authors, so I'm going to suggest that they be moved. A study conducted by Park. Place the year in parentheses. Remove them from the end, like that. Here at the end, I want to suggest a summative transition, as we noticed in our thesis or our summary versus synthesis template. So I don't want to have summary, I want synthesis, so I'm going to add a summative conclusion to explain relationships. I might also add a graphic on the transitions. And insert one of our multimedia tips so the writer can use this tip in their future writing. Here in this tip, you can see that we suggest different transitions depending on what you want to do. So you want to ask yourself, how does the new idea relate to previous ideas? Choose a relationship verb that relates to the other ideas. So if I'm comparing, I could use something like however. If I'm showing sequence though, I might say something like consequently. Or if I want to explain a causative connection that builds a connection to my argument, I might say thus or therefore. Then I'll summarize in my own words what the source said. Again, like paraphrasing, explicate why it's interesting, connecting it to my writing, and I might finish with a parenthetical citation if I've used someone else's ideas. So at this point, I've reached page 9. Typically, we review for about an hour or about 10 pages, as I mentioned. Here, I'm going to pause at this point for the purpose of our webinar. And I'm going to show you what completed feedback looks like. So you got an idea of how we review feedback in a live session. This is very similar to how we would review it asynchronously or not live. So what I'll do now is I will open an example of completed feedback. So here is an example of completed feedback from the Online Campus Writing Center. Usually, you leave the writer with a note on the first page that explains the themes. So this is a little different than what we just did, but here are 4 themes that I identified for this writer. Consistent usage of an acronym, highlighted in yellow, removal of commas that did not meet the fanboy comma requirement, highlighted in blue, usage of past tense to discuss literature and completed methodology, highlighted in purple, and usage of the serial comma, highlighted in green. So here I've given the writer instructions on how to accept the track changes and how to read my feedback. So they can use this key at any point to review the highlights that I have added in. Sort of like a map helping them. You can see here how I've had that color change to explain where synthesis is needed by combining paragraphs. And at the end of my feedback, I provided the same kind of comment, explaining where the writer can use those 4 themes moving forward, pay attention to them in revising the rest of their work. We do welcome students to go ahead and resubmit after they've integrated our feedback. So if we only had the ability to provide you with 10 pages of feedback, you're welcome to integrate those changes and resubmit so we can review the rest of the document at any time. Typically, our policy is 1 appointment per week. So do mind the deadlines when you're submitting your work to the Online Campus Writing Center so we can be sure we get that to you on time. For non-embedded classwork, if you're trying to make an appointment, make your appointment about 3 days before your assignment is due. We return feedback within 2 days, within 48 hours. So you'll want to be sure you're at least scheduling 3, if not 4 days before your assignment is due so that you can provide your tutor with time to review your assignment and also provide yourself time to integrate these changes. As you can see, some active attention is needed to integrating the feedback, so it won't be something that you can just submit upon immediately receiving feedback. This is important for making sure that you've provided yourself and your writing consultant with enough time to create the highest quality document. Moving forward, I'm excited to provide you with assistance on your literature review assignment. If you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to submit your outline, your notes, or your inquiries about the formatting or synthesis components. I'll also be attaching the synthesis webpage to an announcement in the class, so you'll be able to access it from there. And I look forward to seeing your final products. Have a great day.